didn't really do any of that. Would you recommend that to people listening to this who might be jumping into tournaments? Like, do you think it would be a good idea to just challenge yourself and go right into advanced, or do you think people should kind of take the opposite approach and start in rec, get a feel for it, then kind of progressively move forward?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on your goals, really,
Mm-hmm.
or like what you're shooting for. Sorry, I got choked up,
No, you're good, man.
choking on my own spit over here. uh, yeah, I feel like it's kind of like your goals or kind of what you're shooting for. Like when I joined the PDJ, I'd already been playing disc golf for a few years, and like I'd already kind of become a good amateur in my local area. So when I joined the PDJ, I was like, I'm already one of the best AMs here. I'm just going to play advanced because that's like the highest amateur spot. I kind of look at it both ways because I think it's important to learn how to win. Like I think you need to be in those situations where
Yeah.
you're battling when it comes down to the end of the stretch, and you need to learn how to win, which means you're going to lose. You know, you need to learn and go through that process. But I also think, you know, the fastest way to get better is to go against people better than you. That was my entire life growing up playing basketball. Like I wanted to play against older guys. I wanted to play against guys that would basically embarrass me on the court. Cause like, that's the only way to get better. You don't get better just beating up on guys that you already know you're better than, you know, you're not pushing yourself. So I think that's like kind of like a two-edged sword. Like you need
Yeah.
that experience, but you also don't just like, oh, I'm going to play 38 amateur events and win like half of them. Like, you know,
What are some things that you're thinking about when you step up to the tee and you're, going to do that first drive? What is going through your head when you're thinking about an accurate shot? What are you thinking about?
okay. So like, unless you're playing on the pro tour, you know, and your goal is to be like a professional disc golfer and play the hardest courses in the country, which is what we play. More often than not, you're playing holes like 350 and shorter. You know, if we're just talking in
Mhm.
general, you know, most courses are shorter. So
Yeah.
like trying to throw hard and throw far is great, but like if you're wanting to do well at your tournaments and whatever division you're playing in, like throwing accurately and shorter, like that's gonna help you out. You know, like you need distance going against the best, but you don't really have to have distance to just go out and play disc golf. So that's kind of where that quote came from. That mindset. It's the guy who runs our local club, Tim Barr. He's just a Tennessee legend. He's hosted a couple majors here. Like he's the man, and he's still competitive playing pro, and he throws maybe 350, but he throws it where he wants it, and he makes his putts most of the time. So like, you know, that just kind of proves, you know, distance isn't just the most important thing. But when it comes to like, you know, stepping up to a shot, I feel like most people, I don't think they put a lot of thought into like, okay, what's the higher percentage throw to get the result that I want more often than not, right? Like if a shot is a big power sidearm throw, but you may not have that in your wheelhouse, like why go to that? You know, like why
Yeah.
force that? You know, if that's not really your thing, throw a backhand turnover that gives you a 40-footer, but it gives you that 40-footer every time. Maybe you make that putt one or two, three times out of 10, you know? Maybe you throw the sidearm and you park it once, but then you like roll your wrist over and you throw it OB like three other, you know, it's just kind of putting a little thought into like the percentages of what can I do more often than not.
Would you say it's necessarily bad, if you're just a casual player, to not have an amazing sidearm as good as your, backhand?
I mean, I feel like it's always good to keep working, you know, and keep like when I go out and play casual rounds, like throw them both, you know,
Yeah.
throw them both, putt from them both. Like that's the only way you're going to get better is reps, you know, and putting a little time into it. But I don't think it has to be like a necessity. I mean, I think if you're trying to move up the ranks, like if you look in the professional disc golf, like almost everyone has a sidearm now, you know,
Yeah.
everyone's got both. So it's kind of become a necessity on the highest level. But yeah, like you're talking about, I mean, if you just go out and you're just throwing frisbees for fun, like it's just, you know, do what you got and like have fun doing it.
What do you think helped you out the most learning or figuring out those straight shots?
Learning to throw a putter.
Okay.
Absolutely learning to throw putters. Putters, when you throw poorly, they flutter, they flip, it looks bad. You know, when you miss with a putter, you really miss, and it shows your flaws. So like learning to be able to throw a putter, I feel like if you can throw a putter and control it, different angles, you can throw anything, really.
When you're throwing that putter, do you recommend something that's pretty neutral? So, for example, I just started to throw a West Side Crown, which I think is like a 3401. Would you recommend something like that, or would you maybe try to go to something more like a harp that's overstable, more of an approach than a putt kind of disc?
I like the neutral. I like the neutral straighter disc. Like taking a disc like that and being able to teach yourself how to throw it on turn, on hyzer, straight. Like I think that's very valuable. You know, you're not just learning one throw, which is hard and let it fade. You're learning all three different shots.
What about the grip on the putter? Are you doing the same as you would a driver, or do you change it up a little bit?
So I do power grip putters when I'm throwing them harder, but I also learned a fan grip to go with it for those 200 sub 200 foot shots, because I think having a fan grip just gives you a little bit more control and there's not as much spin. You're not having to throw as hard. So, and if you only power grip all the time, then for a 150 foot upshot, you're going to have to like baby it and kind of change speeds and like,
Yeah.
you know, overthink it. So I think learning, I mean, I know some guys that just throw everything with a power grip, you know, or modified power or fan grip or whatever. So, you know, I think it's good to have both. I'm pretty sure Schustrick, he had a quote back in the day that he felt like his game really took off when he taught himself a fan grip and got better with kind of controlling stuff. I'm pretty sure I remember reading that somewhere. It's like he could throw far and he could crush, but then he like made himself learn a fan grip and just added that little bit of control, and it benefited him a long way.
For those who might not be exactly sure what a fan grip is, could you maybe explain like what a fan grip is and maybe how it's a little bit different than a power grip?
So power grip is going to be all four fingers kind of like tucked into the rim. And I know I've played with a lot of guys and I ask questions. Like I'm pretty sure Michael Johansson tucks this finger and then these three fan on the bottom of the disc. So a fan grip is going to be where you're not just gripping all fingers into the rim. There's a bunch of different ones. I kind of do one where I tuck my pointer finger and my pinky finger, and then the middle and the ring kind of fan out. I've heard that called a modified fan. I've also heard it called a modified power. You know, everybody's got a million names for stuff, but basically that fan grip is where you're getting some fingers out on the bottom of the flight plate, you know, and getting a little bit more feel and coverage on the disc.
That just a little bit to make sure the disc comes out easier, a little more smooth on the release, as opposed to the power grip. You're putting more power into it, so it's going to come out regardless.
Yeah, I think it just gives a little more control. You got a little more coverage holding onto the disc, and it's not just ripping off four fingers and generating a lot of spin. A little bit slower generally.
And then I guess another question I have is, let's say, you know, you're in the woods, you're trying to throw that really straight shot. You don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. I know sometimes when you're driving, you could kind of fall off to the right, if that makes sense, and your disc will kind of trail to the right a little bit, or, you know, you can really throw that extreme hyzer. And so like, is there anything, I guess, with your body that would help throwing that straight shot, like maybe doing I don't want to say less, but like a smaller X step to maybe try to point your body in a straighter direction? Is that kind of the key to throwing a straight shot, or what do you think?
I think when you're throwing in the woods, like I think it's easier to hit a gap if you take an understable disc and you're throwing with hyzer kind of into the gap and let the disc work for you, versus trying to throw a neutral disc flat and then just hit it perfectly and have it perfectly go down the tunnel, right? I think it's generally easier for more people to just throw on a hyzer angle. So like if you're trying to learn to throw better in the woods and hitting gaps, I would suggest taking a more understable disc and trying to hyzer flip into the shot. It just seems to be easier to hit than that perfect flat throw every time. That time when I was pretty quickly became like one of the better advanced players, and then was kind of playing pro locally, like regionally, and then kind of stepping into pro. We had some really good players here in East Tennessee. Tim Barr that I mentioned, has been a great player for a long time. Tim Alston and Jason Light were the two like really good pros here. Jason Light was sponsored by Innova back in the day. He's been sponsored by Prodigy. Like I think he's sponsored by Infinite now. Just a really good player. Both of them used to play a lot and tour a little bit back in like the early 2000s. So like really good players, and they would just kick my butt here in East Tennessee because they could throw putters and they could throw mids, you know. And so I think for me, the better I got at learning to control the slower discs, the better I got at playing in the woods, and the better I got at keeping up with those guys. But definitely watching them shape the woods with like understable putters, like beat up putters, beat up mids. You know, that was just wild to watch because I've kind of always had a sidearm from the beginning. So like I never really had to work on throwing understable stuff to go left because I always had that flick. But it's definitely a different shot, the flippy backing compared to an overstable sidearm.